They decided her fate without raising their voices, and that quiet was what made it unbearable. Eliza Morano stood in the hard-packed dirt of the homestead yard. The sky stretched wide and pale above her, while her husband's family spoke as if discussing the weather. Winter was coming early, they said. Supplies were thin. A household needed purpose, and purpose needed children. After 8 years of marriage, Eliza had given them none. No one used cruel words. They did not need to. The pauses did the work. The way her name was spoken without warmth. The way her husband stared past her shoulder, jaw tight, hands useless at his sides. He did not argue. He did not agree either. He simply let it happen, and that silence cut deeper than any accusation. She was told she could take what fit in one sack. She was told she would be safer leaving now than later, before the snows closed the land. She was told this was for the good of everyone. Eliza nodded. She had learned long ago that showing pain only made people uncomfortable, and discomfort often turned into anger. She walked into the house she had cleaned, cooked in, and warmed with her own hands. She folded her few clothes carefully. She took her mother's small, stone-handled knife, its edge worn smooth by years of use. Last, she picked up a rolled bundle of papers, sketches and notes written in a careful, slanted hand. Her father's hand. Knowledge passed quietly, never meant for a room like this. When she stepped back outside, no one tried to stop her. No one wished her luck. The gate creaked as she closed it behind her, and the sound seemed final, like a door sealing a chapter of her life. The prairie opened before her, vast and indifferent. The wind carried the smell of dry grass and distant snow. Eliza walked without looking back. Each step away from the homestead felt unreal, as if she might wake at any moment and find herself still inside, stirring a pot over the fire. But the cold bit her cheeks, sharp and honest. This was real. Fear came quickly once she was alone. Not the loud kind, but the steady kind that settled into her chest and stayed. She had little money, no claim to land, no promise of shelter. A woman alone in the Montana Territory was expected to disappear, marry again, beg, or leave. Everyone assumed one of those outcomes would claim her soon enough. Eliza stopped walking when the sun dipped low. From where she stood, she could see the land slope toward a narrow canyon of pale limestone, carved long ago by water that no longer ran strong. The rock face caught the fading light, glowing faintly gold. She studied it, not with desperation, but with calculation. Her father had taught her to see stone differently. Where others saw walls, he saw warmth held steady. Where others saw darkness, he saw protection from wind and fire alike. As a child, she had traced shapes in the margins of his papers, while he explained how earth could shelter better than timber, if one knew how to listen to it. Eliza felt the familiar pull of doubt then, the voice that whispered she was foolish, that she should turn back, apologize, accept whatever small mercy might still be offered. Pride would not keep her warm. Anger would not stop the snow. But another voice answered, quieter and firmer. It reminded her that she had already been dismissed, already counted as lost. If she failed now, she would fail on her own terms. She walked toward the canyon as the light faded. The ground grew uneven, her boots slipping on loose stone. Her hands shook from cold and from something else, resolve sharpening into focus. She was not running anymore. She was choosing. By the time darkness settled fully, she stood at the edge of a shallow cave mouth, barely more than a shadow in the rock. Wind passed over it instead of through it. The ground inside was dry. Eliza stepped in and felt the air change immediately, calmer, steadier. She set down her sack and sat on the stone floor. For the first time since morning, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. Tears came then, sudden and silent, not for the home she lost, but for the version of herself that had believed obedience would earn safety. When the tears stopped, She wiped her face and stood. Winter was coming. The world had turned its back on her, but the land had not. Eliza Morano would survive, not because she was wanted, but because she knew how. By morning, the canyon was filled with sound. Stone scraped against stone. A steady rhythm echoed softly from the limestone walls, slow and patient. Eliza Morano worked with her sleeves rolled down and her hair tied back, her breath rising in short clouds as the cold air met her skin. She had chosen a place where the rock curved inward naturally, where the ceiling already dipped low enough to trap warmth. She did not rush. Rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes could cost more than pride out here. She began by clearing loose rubble from the cave mouth, stacking usable stones to one side. Each piece was chosen by weight and shape, not by size alone. Her father's voice lived in her memory, calm and exact. Stone must sit the way it wants to sit. Force breaks it. Patience makes it strong. By midday, the sound of footsteps reached her ears. Eliza did not look up at first. She had expected this. Smoke from her small fire had been visible from the valley, and curiosity always traveled faster than kindness. When she finally turned, she saw Martha Turner standing a few paces back, arms folded tight against her chest. Behind her hovered Lucy, her teenage daughter, eyes bright with interest despite the cold. "Well," Martha said, glancing at the cave and then at Eliza, "I heard you'd taken leave of your senses." Eliza set her tool down carefully. "Good afternoon," she replied, her voice even. Martha sniffed. "You can't live in a hole in the ground. Winter will bury you." Eliza nodded once, as if agreeing with part of the statement. "Only if it's built wrong." That answer earned a short, humorless laugh. Martha shook her head. "Wood cabins have stood here for years. That's how things are done." Eliza did not argue. She never argued with people who had already decided they were right. Instead, she lifted one of the stones she had shaped and fitted it into place along the inner wall. It slid into position cleanly, locking with the others. No gaps, no wobble. Lucy stepped closer. "Why here?" she asked before her mother could stop her. Eliza met the girl's eyes. "The rock stays cool in summer and warm in winter. The earth holds the temperature steady. Wind passes over it instead of through it." Martha frowned. "Sounds like old stories." "They are old," Eliza said. "That's why they still work." The women left soon after, unconvinced. But they were not the last. Over the next few days, others came. Some came openly. Some stood at a distance and watched. A man named Caleb Turner, Martha's husband, rode by once and slowed his horse long enough to call out, "You'll freeze before the snow's done falling." His tone was polite, almost friendly, but his eyes held the same judgment she had seen before. Eliza simply waved and returned to her work. She hauled water from the creek, her hands numb as she mixed clay and ash for mortar. She reinforced the entrance with a short stone wall angled against the wind. Inside, she shaped the floor slightly lower at the center so cold air would sink away from where she would sleep. Each choice had a reason. Each movement followed knowledge passed down quietly, never written for approval. At night, when her muscles burned and doubt crept close, she sat by the fire and studied her father's sketches. Simple lines, clear notes, no wasted words. She wondered what the people watching her thought when they returned to their cabins. She wondered if any of them questioned, even briefly, whether tradition alone was enough to keep them safe. More visitors came as the structure took form. Laughter followed some of them. One man called it a fancy grave. Another suggested she would change her mind once the first real snow fell. Eliza listened and kept working. She answered questions when asked. She explained when curiosity replaced mockery, but she never defended herself. Lucy Turner returned often. Sometimes she brought bread. Sometimes she just watched. Eliza showed her how to test stone for cracks and how to place weight so walls carried it downward, not outward. The girl listened carefully, asking questions without judgment. By the time the first thin snow dusted the valley, the cave no longer looked like a refuge born of desperation. It looked intentional, solid, quietly strong. From the outside, it still appeared strange. From the inside, it already felt like shelter. And though many still shook their heads as they passed, fewer were laughing now. Winter did not arrive all at once. It tested the land first. Cold nights crept in, sharp and dry, followed by mornings where frost clung to every fence rail and blade of grass. Smoke rose early from the valley as families burned more wood than they planned. Cabins groaned as boards tightened and shifted. People noticed these things, and they noticed something else too. Eliza Morano's fire burned less. From the outside, her cave looked unchanged, still tucked into the pale rock as if it had always been there. But those who passed by on their way to the creek or the church began to slow their steps. They felt it before they understood it. The air near the cave was calmer. The wind bent around it instead of cutting through. Inside, Eliza worked quietly. The walls held warmth from the small fire she kept low and steady. She slept through the night without waking to feed it. In the mornings, she touched the stone and felt yesterday's heat still there, waiting. She marked small changes in her journal, careful notes about airflow and moisture. Survival was not luck, it was attention. In the valley below, wooden cabins struggled. Chimneys smoked constantly. Children coughed from the dry air. Firewood stacks shrank faster than expected. At the small church, Father Samuel Donnelly noticed fewer faces each Sunday. Storms made travel harder, and cold made people cautious. One afternoon, Father Donnelly stopped near the canyon on his way back from visiting a sick parishioner. He hesitated, then stepped toward the cave. Eliza greeted him politely and offered him a place near the fire. He removed his gloves and paused, surprised by the warmth. "This is steady," he said, choosing his words carefully. "It is," Eliza replied. They spoke of practical things at first. Weather, supplies, the coming months. Father Donnelly asked questions, not to challenge her, but to understand. When he left, he thanked her. Not for shelter, but for the conversation. Nathan Brooks, the surveyor, came next. He had measured land for years and respected numbers more than opinions. He walked the cave's perimeter, studied the entrance angle, the depth of the floor. "You planned this," he said finally. It was not a question. "Yes," Eliza answered. Word traveled, slowly, carefully. People still did not apologize for their earlier laughter, but they stopped repeating it. Some asked questions. Some only watched. Then, in the middle of the season, the cold deepened without warning. One night, the wind rose suddenly, howling across the valley. Snow followed, thick and heavy. By morning, the world was white and quiet, sound pressed flat under the weight of it. Eliza woke early and stepped outside. The cold struck her face, sharp but manageable. She returned inside and closed the stone door panel she had set in place days earlier. As she sat by the fire, she remembered another winter long ago. A different place, a different house. She had been younger then, newly married, believing safety was something granted by others. That winter, she had followed every rule, trusted every promise. When sickness came through the settlement, she had been told to wait, to be patient, to not make trouble. She had waited. Someone she loved had not recovered. The memory tightened her chest. It would have been easy to turn away now. Easy to say that those who doubted her had chosen their own path. A knock came at her door. Eliza froze. No one traveled in weather like this unless they had no choice. She opened the door to find Isaiah Redfeather standing in the snow, wrapped tight against the cold. He had guided traders through the territory for years and knew the land better than most. He nodded once, respectful. "Your shelter holds," he said simply. It does, Eliza replied. They shared warmth and quiet conversation. Isaiah spoke of how his people used earth and stone long before timber cabins arrived. Different knowledge, he said. Same purpose. By the next day, smoke rose thin and weak from several cabins in the valley. Firewood was running low. Fear settled in, slow and heavy. People began to look toward the canyon, not with judgment now, but with calculation. Eliza watched them from a distance. She understood the moment for what it was. This was where knowledge turned into responsibility. She could remain silent. She could protect what she had built and nothing more. Instead, she walked down into the valley and spoke plainly. She explained what she knew, how stone held heat, how entrances mattered, how small changes could save fuel and lives. Some listened, some resisted, but the laughter was gone. Winter had delivered its verdict, and it had not favored tradition alone. The storm arrived faster than anyone expected. By midday, the sky darkened to a dull gray, and the wind rose without warning. Snow fell hard and sideways, erasing the familiar lines of the valley. Paths disappeared within minutes. Doors that had opened easily that morning would not open again by nightfall. Eliza Morano felt the change before she saw it. The pressure in the air shifted, and the sound of the wind deepened. She secured the stone door at the cave entrance and checked the fire, keeping it low and steady. Inside, the cave held its calm. The walls did not shake. The warmth remained. Somewhere beyond the canyon, people were caught in the open. The Turner family had left their cabin early, hoping to reach a neighbor's place before the weather worsened. They did not make it far. The wind pushed them off the trail, and the cold closed in quickly. Caleb Turner struggled to keep his footing as he led the way. His coat stiff with ice, his leg, injured weeks earlier, slowed him more than he admitted. Martha held tight to her youngest child, her face pale with fear she no longer tried to hide. Lucy stayed close, her eyes scanning the white blur around them. She remembered the cave. She remembered the warmth she had felt there. "We need to turn back," Martha said, her voice thin. "There is no back," Caleb replied, though doubt filled his words. They moved blindly until Lucy shouted. Through the storm, she saw the pale outline of rock rising from the snow. The canyon. Hope cut through the fear, sharp and sudden. By the time they reached the cave, Caleb could barely stand. His injured leg had given out, and he leaned heavily on his son's. Martha knocked weakly on the stone door, unsure if anyone would hear over the wind. Inside, Eliza heard it immediately. A dull, uneven sound. She rose and opened the door without hesitation. Cold rushed in, fierce and biting. Eliza pulled them inside quickly, her movements firm and practiced. She guided the children toward the fire, wrapped them in blankets, and helped Caleb to the floor. He winced, breath short, his face drawn tight. Martha looked around the cave, her eyes wide. Warmth surrounded them. The air was still. She swallowed hard. "I was wrong," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "About everything." Eliza met her gaze for a moment, then looked away. There was no victory in this, only necessity. She worked steadily, checking Caleb's leg, adjusting his position, offering water warmed over the fire. Lucy watched closely, recognizing the same calm focus she had seen during the building. Fear slowly loosened its grip on the room. Outside, the storm raged on. Snow piled high against the stone entrance, but the angled wall held. Wind screamed past without finding a way in. The cave did not answer the storm. It simply endured. As hours passed, the children slept. Martha sat near the fire, hands folded, eyes fixed on the stone walls. "I thought strength looked loud," she said softly. "I thought it meant standing tall in the open." Eliza added a piece of wood to the fire. "Strength looks like what lasts," she replied. Caleb stirred and opened his eyes. He looked at Eliza, shame clear on his face. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "Yes," Eliza answered. "I did." The storm continued through the night and into the next day. Other figures appeared at the cave entrance, lost and exhausted. Eliza took them in as well, guiding them to space she had prepared without knowing who would need it. No one argued, no one mocked. The cave became a place of quiet survival when the wind finally eased and light returned to the valley. Those inside stepped out into a changed world. Snow covered everything, smooth and unbroken. Smoke no longer rose from many cabins. People looked at the cave differently now. It was no longer strange, it was proven. Eliza stood at the entrance, watching the valley wake slowly from the storm. She felt no triumph, only a steady certainty. They had come to her when nothing else held, and she had held. Spring did not arrive with celebration. It arrived quietly, almost cautious, as if the land itself needed to be sure the worst had truly passed. Snow pulled back from the valley inch by inch. Paths reappeared where nothing had been visible but white. Cabins stood weathered and tired, some abandoned, some repaired with haste and humility. Smoke returned, thinner now, more careful. People moved differently, slower, more observant. Eliza Morano noticed these changes from her place near the creek. Water flowed again, cold and clear, just as it had when she first chose this land. Her cave stood unchanged, stone clean and solid, holding the same calm it had through the winter. What had changed was how people approached it. They no longer lingered at a distance. Men and women came with questions, not challenges, not laughter, questions spoken plainly. How deep should the floor be set? Which direction mattered most for the entrance? How much stone was enough, and how much was too much? Eliza answered patiently, never raising her voice, never claiming more than she knew. She showed them her notes, simple drawings, clear measurements, knowledge without decoration. Some listened closely, others struggled at first, letting go of old habits. But the memory of the storm remained sharp. Pride had frozen faster than hands that winter. No one wished to repeat the lesson. Lucy Turner came often. She brought paper now, not just curiosity. She wrote as Eliza spoke, copying diagrams with careful attention. When she made mistakes, Eliza corrected her gently, never with shame. Martha watched from a distance at first, then closer, helping where she could. She did not speak of the past. Neither did Eliza. The work itself seemed to settle what words could not. By early summer, new structures appeared along the valley. Some were full cave homes. Others were cabins reinforced with stone walls, angled entrances, earth packed carefully where wind once slipped through. They were not copies. They were adaptations. Knowledge taking root in different hands. Father Donnelly spoke of Eliza's work during gatherings, not as a miracle, but as a reminder. Nathan Brooks adjusted his surveys to include stone and earth as proper materials, no longer marking them as unusual. Isaiah Redfeather nodded quietly when he passed the canyon, as if seeing something familiar restored rather than invented. Eliza accepted payment when offered and refused it when it came with pride attached. She took on apprentices for short seasons, then sent them away to build on their own. Independence mattered. Survival meant little if it was borrowed forever. One afternoon, as the sun leaned warm against the rock, Eliza stood near the cave entrance and watched Lucy explain airflow to two younger children. The girl's voice was steady, confident. Eliza felt something loosen in her chest then, something she had carried tightly for years. She thought of the homestead she had left, of the quiet dismissal, of the belief that worth was measured by what one could produce for others. That belief had nearly erased her. Now her value stood carved into the land itself, not loud, not decorated, just enduring. As summer deepened, travelers passing through the territory stopped to ask about the stone homes near the creek. They carried the ideas with them when they left. Across the region, small changes began to appear. A lowered doorway here, a stone wall there. Signs of learning passed hand to hand, never needing Eliza's name attached to it. She did not seek recognition, but it found her anyway, in nods of respect, in the way conversations paused when she spoke, in the absence of doubt where judgment once lived. One evening, Eliza sat alone at the edge of the canyon, watching the sky turn soft with fading light. The land stretched wide and open before her, the same land that had once seemed determined to swallow her whole. She thought of the woman who had stood here months ago, frightened and dismissed, carrying everything she owned in one sack. That woman had survived, not by demanding a place, but by building one. The wind moved gently through the valley, no longer an enemy, just part of the world. Eliza rose and walked back toward her home of stone and earth, steady and unmovable. Some stories are not about being saved. Some are about what happens when someone refuses to disappear and shows others how not to disappear too.